Today on the show, Elon Musk and President Trump go at it over the big, beautiful bill. Greta Thunberg, remember her? Takes a 3-hour USS Minnow tour to Gaza. Boys are beating girls again at California track meets, and the Trump White House has found a new and hilarious way to celebrate Pride Month. Yes, it's June. But first, Father's Day is coming. Skip the socks, skip the grill tools. Get Dad something he'll actually use. Daily Wire Plus, now 40% off. He'll get ad-free shows from the most trusted voices in conservative media, plus full access to our premium entertainment library, including Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's new series, Parenting. It's the content he wants, with the values he raised you on. No shipping, no fluff. Just click, gift, and instantly become his favorite child. Go to dailywireplus.com, use code DAD40, and save 40% now. Alrighty, folks, so the big, beautiful bill is reaching fruition in the Senate. What will the final form look like? We don't actually know at this point. A lot of negotiations happening inside the Republican Senate caucus. And of course, you have people who are fiscal hawks like Senator Ron Johnson, who's been a guest on the show, talking about the shortcomings of the big, beautiful bill in terms of spending. Obviously, this bill maintains Biden levels of spending. It does not, in fact, cut back to 2019 pre-pandemic levels of spending. And then you have people inside the Republican caucus like Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri, who thinks the bill actually goes too far in cutting spending. The House bill goes too far by putting work requirements on Medicaid, for example. So as always, you have a fractious Republican caucus, and the question is, what gets through? What's emerging right now inside the Republican Party is a fight between the ideal and the pragmatic. And neither side is actually wrong in this particular fight. So this has now boiled down to a fight between President Trump and Elon Musk. So Elon, of course, recently left the administration. He had reached the end of the period of time in which he was capable of holding that office without some form of congressional approval. Over the course of the last couple of days, he put out a tweet saying, quote, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it." Okay, so that is open war on the so-called big, beautiful bill. Meanwhile, the administration, of course, is pushing forward the big, beautiful bill. So there's been some speculation about what caused Elon Musk to lose it on the so-called big, beautiful bill. That speculation was handed off to Axios by presumably some members of the administration. According to Axios, Musk and Trump remain friends and allies. Two people in frequent communication with both told Axios, but they said Trump was somewhat irked by Musk's social media sabotage. The sources familiar with the Trump-Musk relationship say there appeared to be 4 inflection points that led to his caustic attack on President Trump's bill. 1, the legislation cuts the electric vehicle tax credit that helps car makers like Musk's Tesla. 2, Musk was working at the White House as a special government employee, and he was trying to stay in that role beyond the 130-day time limit set by statute for unpaid advisory positions. Ultimately, White House officials looked at that legally, and they said, we can't actually extend you this way. Also, Musk wanted the FAA to use Starlink. And finally, on Saturday night, President Trump abruptly announced that he was withdrawing the nomination of a man named Jared Isaacman, an Elon Musk ally, to be the NASA administrator. And there was some speculation that that was sort of a slap at Musk by members of the Trump personnel team. That Isaacman, who was only nominated to that position, presumably because he was friends with Musk, was now being smacked because Musk was leaving and it was safe to smack him. That was part of the speculation. The sort of more innocuous explanation is that Isaacman had a history of donations to Democrats. And the White House is very big into the idea of Republican loyalty, even though, again, many of the people who surround the president were not always fans of the president. Okay, so let's leave aside the speculation about why Musk was attacking the bill and look at the actual content of the attack. So the actual content of the attack suggests that the bill spends too much money. And that's true. The bill does spend too much money. As Senator Johnson has pointed out on this program, the bill maintains Biden levels of spending. It does not cut the spending back to 2019 levels. So idealistically, should we go back to 2019 spending levels? Absolutely. Even if we did, by the way, go back to 2019 spending levels, we were still on a debt crisis trajectory, just a little bit slower. Because in 2019, we were spending about $4 trillion a year. And today we spend $6.5 trillion a year, which is a radical increase, obviously. But it is not as though the underlying issue, which is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, was going away, even if we went back to the 2019 spending trajectory. But on an idealistic level, obviously this is true. And this is why so many conservatives feel torn about the big, beautiful bill. Because yes, it does some good things, and it also does some quite bad things, like keeping in place the Biden levels of spending. So then you get to the question of the pragmatic. Idealistically, and on an ideological basis, Senator Johnson is right. Senator Rand Paul is right. Critics like Chip Roy in the House are right. On a pragmatic level, they are wrong. And the reason that they are wrong on a pragmatic level is because Republicans, again, have the slimmest of slim majorities in the House. Do you truly believe that there is a majority in the House to cut spending back to 2019 levels? The answer, of course, is absolutely not. It is controversial enough to make any cuts at all in the House. The same thing is true in the Senate. Republicans have, effectively speaking, a three and a half vote majority. I say and a half because they have 53 votes in the Senate, and J.D. Vance, the vice president, can break a tie. But that is a very slim majority, just practically speaking. You figure that if somebody tried to do the Ron Johnson approach and cut back to 2019 levels in this bill, you would get fallout from Josh Hawley in Missouri, from Susan Collins in Maine, from Lisa Murkowski in Alaska. You probably get some fallout from other senators in purple states who would feel that their neck was on the line. So you probably lose 7, 8 senators if you tried to do the thing that Senator Ron Johnson is trying to do. If politics is the art of the possible, then the question becomes this: would you prefer to have the current levels of spending without a tax cut, or would you prefer to have current levels of spending minus a little bit plus a tax cut? Those are the two choices on the table. And this was the point that was being made by Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, when he talked about the mistake that Elon Musk is making in attacking the bill. Here he was.
With all due respect, my friend Elon is terribly wrong about the one big beautiful bill. We had a long conversation yesterday, he and I. Spoke for, I think, more than 20 minutes on the telephone, and I extolled all the virtues of the bill, and he seemed to understand that. Elon is missing it, okay? And it's not personal. For him to come out and pan the whole bill is to me just very disappointing, very surprising in light of the conversation I had with him yesterday.
Now, again, it is not a giant shock that critics of government spending are feeling a little bit frustrated, but welcome to the party, pal. I mean, some of us have been very angry at government spending for literally our entire public careers. So many of the sort of newfound budget hawks, I mean, listen, I'm glad that they're there, but let's be real about this. When Republicans actually had control of Congress, which they gained in 2010, thanks to Barack Obama's radical increase in spending, and then the Tea Party movement came about, and then Obama got shellacked in the midterms, Republicans were never capable of making these sort of significant spending trajectory cuts that would have been necessary to actually fix the problem. The last time Republicans seriously attempted to fix the problems with the federal budget was 2005, when George W. Bush, after his reelect, attempted to move toward what would be the equivalent of health savings account and Social Security, which was called privatizing Social Security, which effectively said to people who are below a particular age that instead of you receiving a defined benefit package, instead of that, what you would actually do is take the money you would pay to Social Security, they'd put it in an investment account, and then it would be linked to the stock market. If that had happened, by the way, then many of the budgetary problems that we are now looking at would have been solved. But everybody didn't like that because this is the third rail of American politics. And let's be real about this. President Trump ran in 2016 on the principle that he would never touch these things. So I don't know why anyone is acting all shocked and appalled by this. This was part of the MAGA movement. Part of the MAGA movement was big spending. Pretending that part of the MAGA movement was not big spending is silly. So yes, it is great that Elon Musk came in and wanted to cut waste, fraud, and abuse with Doge. And I'm glad Doge is there. I'm glad the Department of Governmental Efficiency is going line by line through every budget item at all the various departments and looking for places where funds are being misallocated or misspent. That's fine, but that is not going to touch the underlying problem. And again, what you see with President Trump is what you get. President Trump pledged he was not going to touch these major social benefit programs. So when we talk about President Trump not being a small spender, that's always been true. And he was a heterodox Republican politician. So I asked our friends and sponsors at Perplexity about this. How much did President Trump expand spending from 2017 to 2019? I didn't want to count the pandemic. And then I asked, how much is the federal government slated to spend in 2025? What percentage of that spending is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and service on the debt? So to answer the first question, Trump-era federal spending expansion from 2017 through 2019. According to Perplexity, when President Trump took office, the CBO projected deficits would be 2 to 3% of GDP during his term. The deficit instead reached nearly 4% of GDP in 2018 and 4.6% in 2019, driven largely by the 2017 tax cuts and increased discretionary spending. Over his 4 years, President Trump signed or enacted $7.8 trillion in new initiatives. By the way, only $2 trillion of that was actually attributable to the 2017 tax cuts, which means $5.8 trillion was everything else. This year, the federal government is slated to spend $7 trillion. And how's that money being spent? And this is the key. Okay, if you actually want to redo federal spending, you need to look at the entitlement programs. According to Perplexity, the 2025 outlays, Social Security, $1.4 trillion. That is 20% of the federal budget. Medicare, $1 trillion, another 14% of the federal budget. Medicaid and other health, $0.8 trillion, $800 billion. That's 11% of the federal budget. Net interest, almost $1 trillion, 14% of the federal budget. Altogether, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the interest on our debt, almost 60% of our federal budget. Okay, that is a wild statistic. And this is why when people say, well, you can cut on the discretionary spending, cut on defense, that is not the major driver of our national debt. And until the American people get serious about that, ain't nothing going to change. And so this is why I say there is a difference between the ideologically accurate and the pragmatic. And Elon, again, my sympathies are with Elon. He's a man coming from the tech world, outside of government. He just wants to fix the problem. And this is what you see with a lot of the tech guys who are associated with the Trump administration. All they want is to fix the problem. They come in and they say, I want to fix this the way that I would my company. I want to slash staff. I want to recapitulate the hiring process. I want to make sure that everybody knows what they do here. And this is exactly what Elon did when he came in. He was literally doing the thing that Steve Jobs used to do at his own company. Steve Jobs famously used to go walk around the office. He'd get in the elevator with somebody, and then he would ask them to define their job. And if they couldn't, he would fire them. And Elon literally tried to do that with the federal government. The problem is the federal government is not, in fact, a private company. It does not work that way. And you can't apply the same actual calculation in how to change it that you would to a privately held company. It just does not work that way. The way that the federal government actually works is that you have to figure out if there is enough consensus to do a big thing. Right now, Republicans have a consensus to do a big thing with taxes, which is maintain the current tax rate. And they have the consensus to make some relatively small cuts with regard to the future of Medicaid growth. And again, let's be clear about this. This is not a cut to Medicaid. It is a cut to future Medicaid growth. Okay, that is what the support is there for. And if politics is the art of the possible, then what is President Trump supposed to do? He can't just magic this thing into existence. And this is one of the great lies about politics generally. Politicians will always tell you they can magic things into existence. No politician can. We have a system, for better or for worse. In many cases, for better. When it comes to the inability of the American people to actually take debt seriously, certainly for worse. The short-term thinking of the American people will end up biting us directly in the butt when it comes to the national debt. Now, remember, a little bit later on in the show, I'm going to get to Greta Thunberg going to the Gaza Strip. I know, the absurdity it truly is quite real. But you know what else is absurd? The cost on your cell coverage. Pure Talk is my wireless company, a veteran-led company, and they believe every man and woman who has faithfully served this country deserves to proudly fly an American flag made in America. That's why Pure Talk is on a mission to give an allegiance flag, the highest quality American flag, to 1,000 U.S. veterans in time for the patriotic holidays. Flag Day, U.S. Army birthday, they're coming up June 14th. Independence Day, of course, comes up July 4th. Just switch your cell phone service to Pure Talk this month. A portion of every sale will go to provide these high-quality flags to deserving veterans. With plans from just $25 a month for unlimited talk, text, and plenty of data, you can enjoy America's most dependable 5G network while cutting your cell phone bill in half. The average family saves over $1,000 a year. I use Pure Talk for all of my calls, like all of them, personal, business, everything. Their program's great. Just go to puretalk.com/Shapiro to switch hassle-free in as little as 10 minutes. Again, that's puretalk.com/Shapiro to support veterans and to switch to America's wireless company, Pure Talk. If they're good enough for my calls, they're good enough for everyone's. Go check them out right now, puretalk.com/Shapiro. Also, I always assumed restless sleep was inevitable. Night after night, tossing, turning, waking up with that aching back. I convinced myself that's how sleep was supposed to be. And then I tried Helix Sleep. And they made a mattress just for me, and it's way, way better. When I'm on the road, I miss my Helix Sleep mattress. Now, I easily fall asleep in minutes, even when the current news stories would keep me awake. What makes Helix different is they don't just sell you a random mattress. They actually match you with the perfect mattress for your body and sleep style. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or somewhere in between, they've got you covered. They make it so simple to get your best night's sleep every single night. All you have to do is take their sleep quiz and get matched with a custom mattress based on your body type and sleep preferences. And trust me, when you find the right match, you'll wonder how you ever slept on anything else. And producer Zach also just bought a Helix mattress topper on Monday, apparently. Should be arriving any day. He's excited, but my whole family has Helix Sleep at this point. It is great. Helix is offering an incredible summer sale right now. Visit helixsleep.com/Ben. Get 20% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Ben for 20% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know we sent you. Again, just visit helixsleep.com/Ben for this exclusive offer. As Spencer Jacob writes over at the Wall Street Journal, the package of tax and spending measures sent to the Senate, now officially called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, could act like a budgetary wolf bait. It would add around $3 trillion to debt levels over the next decade, compared with existing estimates, and $5 trillion if certain temporary features were made permanent, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. For perspective, federal interest this fiscal year already will be more than the defense budget and more than Medicaid, disability insurance, and food stamps combined. Moreover, the CBO's estimates assume the bond market will not only tolerate a surge in spending, but become more relaxed about it with lower yields. So what if it turns out that with lower yields, people buy fewer bonds? Well, then you have a vicious cycle. Jamie Dimon said you're going to see a crack in the bond market if this continues. But the reality is that Americans don't understand a lot of this stuff. Things seem to be going okay. And so we'll walk our way off that cliff. And again, I'm a person who's been advocating literally my entire career for restructuring of these entitlement programs, but you're not getting in the bill. So the question is, yes on the bill or no on the bill? President Trump spent his weekend attacking opponents of the bill in the Senate, including Rand Paul. He put out a statement in which he snapped at Senator Paul, quote, Rand votes no on everything, but never has any practical or constructive ideas. His ideas are actually crazy. Losers. The people of Kentucky can't stand him. This is a big growth bill. Now, again, the people of Kentucky certainly can stand him. They keep reelecting him. I have major disagreements on Senator Paul with a wide variety of issues. I don't disagree with him on this one. But where Trump is right is that Rand Paul does not tend to live in the world of the pragmatic or the practical. Now, again, I don't think that Senator Paul is to blame for that. I think you do need people in the caucus who are going to try to pull as hard as they can to the right. However, when we, the American public, are considering would it be better for the bill to pass or not to pass, the real question is, do you want to see all the tax rates increase and the spending remain the same, which is likely to be what happens. It is hilarious to me that Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, he's out there saying that he agrees on the big, beautiful bill, that it's a terrible bill. No, he doesn't. He actually doesn't. The thing that he disagrees with is that it cuts spending at all and cuts taxes at all. Remember, if the Democrats were in charge, we would increase taxes and increase spending.
Look, I just read you what Musk said. He said people should be ashamed to vote for this bill. I agree with him.
For very, very different reasons. So Elon Musk is angry about the bill because it spends too much. Schumer is angry about the bill because it spends too little. Just remember, if Democrats are ever in charge again, which I'm sure they will be because politics moves in strange patterns, they will increase taxes radically and increase the spending radically. Now, meanwhile, there are some attempts to, again, cut around the edges, and we need to be clear about what it means when we look at what DOGE is doing, what these House rescission bills would do. They are, in fact, cutting, but they're cutting around the edges. So according to Fox News, the House Freedom Caucus is demanding the House of Representatives vote on the White House's impending $9.4 billion federal spending cut proposal the same week it lands on Capitol Hill. The conservative group, led by Chairman Andy Harris of Maryland, is drawing its line in the sand on Monday with an official position on the coming package, which is expected to call for clawing back government funding for NPR, PBS, and USAID. And that's great. That's fine. We should push the rescission bills forward. We should pass them with alacrity. We should move quickly to do it. Like that is it. That is a good thing. $9.4 billion ain't going to do it. It isn't. Meanwhile, Russ Vought, who is the head of OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, he says the White House is weighing options like impoundment to formalize those DOGE spending cuts. But again, even impoundment of these amounts is not going to radically change the fiscal crisis that America is going to find itself in. That is not President Trump's fault. That's not Republicans' fault. That is the American people's fault. We are the voters, and we cannot hold two thoughts at once. It is not possible for us. Instead, we say that we like our benefits, but we also want tax cuts, and we also want to make sure that we don't have a debt problem. You can't have all of those things. That's not how it works. But because we refuse to acknowledge reality, any politician who tells us we can have all of those things is likely to succeed. Now, meanwhile, what President Trump is right is that the big, beautiful bill is necessary to maintain growth rates. If we radically increase taxes, which is what the expiration of the Trump tax cuts would effectively do, if that were to happen, the growth curve in the country, the investment would absolutely collapse. It would be a disaster area. The markets already are pricing in the big, beautiful bill. They believe that the big, beautiful bill is going to pass. Well, if it doesn't, then you're going to see the markets really, really dump, especially given the fact that there's already so much turmoil in the markets. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, the tariff regime that President Trump has been threatening will be crimping U.S. economic growth this year and also boosting inflation. They said Tuesday they expect GDP to decelerate sharply to 1.6% in 2025 from 2.8% in 2024. They previously expected that we would grow our GDP by 2.2%, but they believe that because of the slowdown in global trade, they are going to see a slowness in growth as well. They also expect that U.S. inflation will pick up. Now, we have seen inflation statistics came out while we were off the air. Those inflation statistics for the last month were the lowest that they've been since basically the beginning of the pandemic. They were 2.1% year on year, which is basically where you want to be. The Federal Reserve is tasked with keeping inflation at 2% annually. So that's where you want to be. So President Trump is saying that the Federal Reserve now needs to lower the interest rates and boost spending by making more liquidity available in the markets. The problem, of course, is that when it comes to the inflation rate, that is in fact a trailing indicator. So what you may be getting in that lack of inflation is a couple of things. Less demand, which is not driving up prices. And also you might be getting the fact that the tariff regime has been in and out and up and down. It's the hokey pokey tariff regime. And because of that, the markets are sort of frozen and paralyzed, and they're not radically escalating prices yet. But the idea is that if the tariffs actually kick into full force and effect, that will increase the inflation, and the Federal Reserve isn't going to jump too fast to lower the interest rates based on an uncertain economic future. Especially, President Trump, at the same time that he's tweeting out that Jerome Powell needs to lower the interest rates, is also saying, quote, I like President Xi of China, always have and always will, but he is very tough, all caps, and extremely hard to make a deal with. Okay, well, are the markets going to be sanguine about that? If the massive tariffs stay on China, is that going to create price inflation? The answer presumably is yes. And you combine that with a very, very weak jobs report in May. And what you see right now is an economic freeze up that is happening because of the amount of uncertainty in the markets. So is the Federal Reserve, in the middle of all that uncertainty, going to throw an interest rate decrease in the middle of that? The answer there is no, because the Federal Reserve believes that eventually the markets are going to get unstuck one way or the other. If they wait a couple of months and the inflation stays low and the tariff regime all works itself out, then they can talk about lowering the interest rates. But what they are afraid of is that they will lower the interest rates, inject more liquidity into the economy, and then you will get price inflation that is basically double what they want. They will get inflation based on their injection of liquidity by lowering the interest rates. And you will also get price inflation based on a tariff regime that actually does at some point fully kick in. According to ADP, private sector job creation slowed to a near standstill in May, hitting its lowest level in more than 2 years as signs emerged of a weakening labor market. Payrolls increased just 37,000 for the month, below the downwardly revised 60,000 in April and the Dow Jones forecast for 110,000. It is the lowest monthly job total from the ADP count since March of 2023. So again, this doesn't mean that we are in serious trouble here in the United States with regard to our economy. However, it is worth pointing out that, as I've said 1,000 times on the show at this point, uncertainty breeds its own form of economic chaos. If you don't know what's coming next, you are very unlikely to hire for the future. By the way, this includes in manufacturing. Goods producing industries lost 2,000 positions for the month. Natural resources and mining are off 5,000, manufacturing down 3,000. And again, that's not a shock either, because one of the things that has happened is that the oil prices have dropped so much at this point that people are not actually ramping up oil production in the United States. So what does this mean? This means that the big, beautiful bill better pass, because if the big, beautiful bill does not pass, then you got a real problem on your hands. Remember, folks, in just a minute, we are going to get to the White House and their take on Pride Month, which is wild and kind of awesome. In darker news, I have bad news for you. You're going to die. Okay, like we all are. I know, just dropping that right on the table right there. But that's where Policy Genius comes in. Policy Genius simplifies life insurance shopping with quotes from top insurers, helping you find affordable coverage that fits your needs and budget, all while giving your loved ones a financial safety net to handle debt, expenses like mortgage payments, or even build wealth over time if the worst were to happen to you. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies starting at just $276 a year for $1 million in coverage. It's an easy way to protect the people you love and feel good about your future. Policy Genius lets you compare quotes from America's top insurers side by side for free, with their licensed support team handling questions, paperwork, advocating for you throughout the process so you can move forward quickly, get the coverage you need, and get back to living your life. What makes them trustworthy is their personalized approach. They know life insurance is not one size fits all, so they clearly present all your options, including coverage amounts, prices, and terms, with complete transparency and no guesswork. Secure your family's future today with Policy Genius. Head on over to policygenius.com/Shapiro to compare free life insurance quotes from top companies. See how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Shapiro. Also, The business landscape has never been more volatile. Tariff policies shift without warning. Supply chains face unprecedented pressure. Cash flow constraints are tightening across industries. In this environment, real-time adaptability isn't just an advantage, it's survival. Companies that can't pivot quickly aren't just falling behind, they're facing existential threats. To navigate this chaos, you need complete visibility across every aspect of your operation, from global shipments and tariff impacts to real-time cash flow analysis. NetSuite by Oracle delivers exactly that through its AI-powered business management suite, already trusted by over 41,000 companies worldwide. As the leading cloud ERP platform, NetSuite consolidates accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into a single unified system that serves as your one source of truth. This comprehensive visibility enables lightning-fast decision-making backed by real-time forecasting and actionable data insights. With AI automation handling routine tasks throughout the platform, your teams can focus on strategic initiatives, while NetSuite identifies bottlenecks, calculates their true cost, and provides clear pathways for rapid pivots when market conditions demand immediate action. It's one system, full control. Tame the chaos with NetSuite. If your revenues are at least in the seven figures, download the free ebook, Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders at netsuite.com/Shapiro. That's netsuite.com/Shapiro. Meanwhile, we have now entered the month of June. And as we all know, June is the greatest month on the American calendar because it is a month of miracles and happiness and joy, specifically queer joy, because June, of course, is Pride Month, the month when we are all supposed to pretend that the most important thing about any human being is their sexual orientation, and that all of America must celebrate this together. And that is what Pride Month is all about. Well, I have some Pride Month stories. It's not going the way that many people on the left were hoping Pride Month was going to go. So, for example, the U.S. military has now decided that they are going to rename a ship. There is a Navy ship that is called USS Harvey Milk. That was always an absurdity of absurdities. Harvey Milk was not a member of the military. Harvey Milk had no impact on military policy. Harvey Milk was a San Francisco Board of Supervisors member in the 1970s who was shot to death after 11 months on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors and became a sort of martyr for the so-called gay rights cause. He also happened to be a guy who was stooping a 16-year-old boy. So, he was, in common parlance, committing a crime. So Harvey Milk had legitimately nothing to do with the military. He served in the Navy during the Korean War. That's literally his only connection to the military. That was also true of millions of other people who served in World War II or the Korean War or the Vietnam War. The U.S. Navy ship Harvey Milk was originally named in 2016 by Ray Mabus under Barack Obama. The idea that we were naming a Navy ship after a man who was only famous for being a San Francisco gay rights activist who was killed in 1978 by a fellow member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors who was mad that he had been fired and that he wasn't getting his full salary. Like that's ridiculous. Like, if you're going to name Navy ships, typically you are going to name them after, naval heroes. You're typically going to name them after people who had an impact on military policy. You're going to name them after places. Name it. The U.S. Navy ship RuPaul should not be a thing. And it was always ridiculous to suggest that we were going to name our Navy ships after sort of DEI heroes in American life. And yet that is what Barack Obama was all about. It was deliberately silly by the Obama administration. And now that's being walked back by the Trump administration during Pride Month of all times. According to the Washington Post, the Pentagon is planning to strip the name from a Navy ship that honors the gay rights icon Harvey Milk, who, by the way, was also stooping a 16-year-old, which is against the law, and could expand the purge to include other vessels recognizing prominent civil rights figures, defense officials said Tuesday. Deliberations, officials said, are ongoing after a recent order by Hegseth to Navy Secretary John Phelan, with the decision to be announced as soon as mid-June to coincide with Pride Month, which President Trump has rejected celebrating because, of course, typically pride is considered a sin. You should not celebrate sin. I know that this word sin has gone out of common usage. I get it. But it is kind of weird that what you're actually celebrating during Pride Month is the sin of pride. In any case, it was unclear when or even if any other Navy vessels honoring civil rights figures could see their titles changed. Sean Parnell, a spokesperson for Hegseth, released a statement acknowledging a review is underway that could result in the renaming of Defense Department installations and resources. In other words, we are no longer going to be painting our bombs with trans pride flags, which to me is a good thing. So in honor of Pride Month, no more U.S. Navy ship Harvey Milk. It is amazing this ever happened in our country, truly. That you name a Navy ship after a guy who is mostly famous for just being a gay rights activist in San Francisco. Truly unbelievable. And meanwhile, in other bad news for the advocates of Pride Month, it turns out that Algeria's Imane Khalif, who was a gold medal winner at the last Paris Olympics in boxing, you may recall, is a dude. I know that was perfectly obvious by looking at him. But it turns out that now a leaked medical report shows that the Algerian boxer was abnormal, stating, quote, chromosome analysis reveals male karyotype. So XY, in other words. I know, we were not supposed to notice that, and it was supposed to be a giant shock. But yeah, they covered it up because a man was beating up the ladies at the Olympics. Speaking of which, California continues to push forward the absurdity of boys racing against girls while pretending to be girls. According to SoapCentral.com, A.B. Hernandez, a transgender high school athlete, has been making waves on social media after winning 2 events, including the high jump and triple jump at the California State Track and Field Championships, as per KCRA. Hernandez is 16 years old and from Jurupa Valley, California, and her recent participation under the new rule change has caused nationwide controversy. His participation. As part of the new rule by the California Interscholastic Federation, if a trans athlete earns a top position, the next highest ranking cisgender athlete can also share the placement and also receive a medal, as per The Guardian. Yeah, but if you put the dude at the top of the podium, and then you're like, yeah, but we'll put like an extra girl at the bottom of the podium so that she can be like number 4 and 3 are kind of tied. How does that make the girls feel any better? They're still standing there below a boy at the top of the podium. Hernandez won first place in the high jump, where he cleared 5 feet 7 inches without any failed attempts. He shared first place with 2 other athletes, Jolene Wetland and Lilani LaRue. He also won first place in the triple jump and received a gold medal and second place in the long jump. The whole thing is unbelievably silly, of course. There was a plane that was flown over the track and field state championship that read, "No boys in girls sports." The Independent Council on Women's Sports and Women Are Real, which is Riley Gaines's group, were the 2 groups that took credit for flying the banner during the event. And good for them, because the American people are not in favor of this. It is not only silly, it is insulting to women and girls and harms girls when they have to compete against boys. Well, some businesses have been getting the notice that Americans are no longer on board for this sort of social radicalism. Others have not. One of the groups that has not, sadly, is MLB, Major League Baseball. 29 of MLB's 30 teams are celebrating Pride Month. They're coming to literally every major league ballpark, apparently. Not sure why any of that is necessary. The Rangers are the only MLB team that has never waded into the LGBT messaging during Pride Month, according to the Daily Wire. In response to questions about skipping Pride Month events, the team said last year, quote, "Our longstanding commitment remains the same, to make everyone feel welcome and included in Rangers baseball, in our ballpark at every game, and in all we do for both our fans and our employees. We deliver on that promise across our many programs to have a positive impact across our entire community," which is the way that you actually ought to treat your fans, by the way. 6 teams changed their official logos on social media to include some version of the pride flag. Another 11 teams wrote a post acknowledging Pride Month. It is obviously the most lib cities that decided to go ahead and change their entire logos, like the Mets, New York, and Baltimore Orioles, and the Washington Nationals, and the Philadelphia Phillies. San Francisco, of course, the Giants. None of that is a super giant shock. However, is this the sort of stuff that is going to drive viewership for the lagging MLB? Absolutely not. The game of classic Americana, catering to the most radical social policies, is one of the silliest marketing fails I can imagine. Truly a silly marketing fail. And it's failed for everybody. Disney continues its string of layoffs, according to the Daily Wire. According to Reuters, Disney is now preparing to conduct mass layoffs that will affect hundreds of employees across various departments, including film and TV, publicity, casting, development, and corporate finance. I mean, maybe that's because, again, so much of their content has been woke trash for the last 10 years or so. Snow White, of course, was a massive bust. The live-action remake supposedly cost $115 million based on a $410 million budget. It only earned a worldwide box office gross of $195 million. Major problems with Snow White. The movies that have been doing okay for Disney are, of course, basically remakes of classic Disney without any of the woke involved in it. It's a Lilo and Stitch remake. It's a big business at the box office. No shock there. Well, actually, there's some people on the right side of the aisle who think that the new Lilo and Stitch movie is, in fact, woke. It appears to me to be, if it's woke, it's less woke than Snow White. So by comparison, they're moving in maybe the right direction a little bit, but it's just indicative of a change in the American mindset. Americans are tired of this stuff. It is one of the reasons why President Trump is in fact president. And it's one of the reasons why President Trump has now authorized his administration to stop parroting the woke propaganda for the month of June. Okay, in a moment, we're going to get to Greta taking a boat to the Gaza Strip. Yes, the most obnoxious person alive, going to visit terrorists. Good times. First, when you're getting ready for bed, going around locking doors, turning off lights, and you just want that peace of mind knowing everything is secure. That's exactly what you get with Simply Safe. It really makes all the difference when it comes to home security. Most security systems only kick in after somebody already broke into your home. By then, it's too late. Simply Safe's new Active Guard outdoor protection actually helps stop the break-ins before they even happen. Here's how it works. AI-powered cameras work with live monitoring agents to spot suspicious activity around your property. If someone's lurking around, the agents can talk to them in real time, turn on spotlights, and call the police if needed. It stops crime before it starts. What I really like is there are no contracts and no hidden fees. Plus, Simply Safe has serious credibility. CNET just named them Best Home Security System of 2025, and over 4 million Americans trust them. They're also ranked #1 in customer service by Newsweek and USA Today. I personally have a Simply Safe system at the studio. It means that every time my staff signs off, they leave the office, they don't have to worry about what's going to happen next. Monitoring plans start around $1 a day. They offer a 60-day money-back guarantee so you can try it risk-free. Visit simplysafe.com/Shapiro to claim 50% off a new system with a professional monitoring plan and get your first month free. That's simplysafe.com/Shapiro. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Now, meanwhile, in what has to be not only one of the stupidest stories of the day, but one of the stupidest stories ever, we're still talking about Greta Thunberg. Now, you recall Greta when she was a not particularly cute child, and we weren't allowed to make jokes about her not being particularly cute because she was a child. Well, now she's 22 years old, so I can say whatever the hell I want about her, and she is an obnoxious brat. She was always an obnoxious brat. Now, she first heard about climate change in 2011, she says, when she was 8 years old. And at that point, she stopped talking, stopped eating, and lost 22 pounds. That was at like age 11. Okay, that is really bad. And we know that her parents were worried about her. They got her some treatment, but apparently he then took her out of school and decided to put her on camera for literally the rest of her life, which is a weird way of doing treatment. He actually said, quote, she can either sit at home and be really unhappy or protest and be happy. Well, I'm not sure why we are supposed to listen to an unhappy teenager protesting just to make them happy. At least someone's happy. She has spent the last decade or so gallivanting around the globe protesting. It's like her way of having fun. She started with climate change, where she famously lectured all the adults for not doing enough. In her humble opinion, I mean, not humble opinion, because she's not humble at all. She's, as I say, truly obnoxious. She said that the adults were not doing enough to stop the world from getting warmer. She didn't have any solutions, but she could yell at the adults. It was her very obnoxiousness that endeared her to the left-wing media machine in the first place, which, for some odd reason, finds small children saying idiotically reductive garbage to be wise and useful. So here she was in 2019, yelling at the adults. Oh my God, you can't get this out of your mind once it's there. It will be implanted in your brain forever, this obnoxious nonsense.
How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight. You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that.
I mean, who cares? I mean, the fact that this was ever treated as a serious issue is beyond me. But it shows that the left is literally willing to use anyone as their tool. And they particularly like using children, specifically because then if you say that the child is wrong, like you're attacking a child. Well, here's the deal. Now she's 22, so I can say whatever I want about her. Okay. She's an adult. She still dresses like a little girl and she still cosplays as a teenage girl. But now she has graduated to the new leftist radical cause of the day, standing for Hamas in Gaza. So this Swedish truant, who still has not graduated college, is now heading for Gaza in a boat. Yes, she's heading to Gaza in a boat. It's like, it's funny. Sorry, it's funny. This spoiled brat who's never held a real job in her life and will never need to because she'll just be a professional activist forever, getting herself arrested for no reason. She's going in a boat. Yay. It's like Lonely Island. She's on a boat reminiscent of the terrorist flotilla from 2010, in which friends of Hamas sent a set of ships to Gaza laden with goods that would have immediately gone to support the terror group. That particular flotilla was offered passage at Ashdod, which is an Israeli port, and they turned it down because they were worried that Israel would confiscate the goods, which Israel would have, because, again, it was illegal. Israel had offered, by the way, to coordinate any aid with the UN. That flotilla was designed to attack Israeli troops. Like, they brought weapons on board, they brought water cannons and stuff. And when the Israelis boarded the ship to stop it, this is back in 2010, some of the people on the ship even grabbed the weapons of the Israelis. 10 Israeli soldiers were wounded. There were 9 of the people on the ships who were killed by Israeli troops. They had openly said they wished to die as martyrs. So again, that was the terrorist kind of propaganda ship of the time. That was 2010. Well, fast forward 15 years, and we're doing the terrorist propaganda ship again. So back to our moronic story, Greta's new pleasure cruise. So our Pippi Longstocking wannabe heroine has now loaded onto the so-called Madeleine ship, which is launched by the so-called Freedom Flotilla Coalition. This Freedom Flotilla has not called for the freedom of Palestinians from Hamas ever, or the freedom of actual hostages currently being held in tunnels as they are dying. Anyway, Thunberg has taken the lead, calling to dismantle Zionism. This is her goal, to dismantle Zionism, which, just for the record, means the forcible murder of millions of Jews who currently live in an actual, not fictional state called Israel. Here she was just a few months back saying as much to her friends in Stockholm. So she's chanting Crush Zionism here. That's what she is chanting. And she's so happy. Remember, she garners her happiness from this sort of performative idiocy. Well, she is now joined on the magic boat of stupidity by propagandists from the Qatari news outlet Al Jazeera, as well as an actor from Game of Thrones. Actually, the right actor, it's the Davos Seaworth guy. So at least he's used to being on the water for fake. They say they're trying to bring humanitarian aid to Gaza, even though actually what's happening in Gaza right now is kind of amazing. Israel has taken over the distribution of humanitarian aid along with the Americans, and they're doing it directly, which is very good because people are now being fed in the Gaza Strip by people who are not Hamas. One of the big problems with the UN is that they worked for Hamas, and so all the aid that was going in was being hijacked by Hamas. Hamas was then taking it and either using it themselves, or they were selling it back to the Palestinians at inflated rates to pay for their terror tunnels and all the rest. So what's happening right now is that Palestinians are actually beginning to get aid, and it's breaking the Hamas stranglehold over the Palestinian population. It's actually creating the possibility of a true Palestinian uprising against Hamas. Hamas centers of distribution, like warehouses storing flour, are now being attacked by Palestinians. So the Palestinians are now free to actually receive aid without having to worry about Hamas stealing it. So what Greta is doing is actually part of a gigantic propaganda effort launched by the exact same pro-Hamas forces that lied earlier this week by claiming that Israel had shot dozens of people at an aid distribution center. It was a complete and total lie parroted by the left-wing media. It was parroted by the BBC. It was parroted by CNN and the Washington Post. Again, it's all part of a bigger propaganda operation. So here's Greta, who has suddenly decided that climate change is so passe and that Hamas is super hot right now. Woo! So she said, quote, "The world cannot be silent bystanders. This silence and passivity that we are seeing from most of the world is deadly. We are seeing a systematic starvation of 2 million people." Literally, the Israelis have been shipping in trucks filled with aid to the same people who took hundreds of Israelis hostages and murdered over 1,000. She says, "Every single one of us has a moral obligation to do everything we can to fight for a free Palestine." It's obnoxious Swedish brat. God, she's so obnoxious. Again, this is all part of her broader crusade to get herself arrested so she can get attention. The same kinds of attention she used to get when she was effectively a child actress. But sort of like other child actresses, she can no longer earn a part. And so we have now reached the Britney Spears, Katy Perry desperation point of the Greta Thunberg character arc, in which she just does increasingly sordid and idiotic stuff in order to get attention. So here she was, a few months ago, just getting herself arrested.
You are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone.
Okay, so, yeah. This is what these people get off on, is the chanting, and she's wearing the terrorist keffiyeh. Again, if you airdrop Greta without the keffiyeh into Gaza, she would last a millisecond. Now, this sort of stuff would be super silly and kind of funny, of course. I mean, listen, I kind of hope, secretly, that this whole thing turns into one of these entertaining reality specials. So, like, the engine breaks, and we get the world's most ridiculous version of Gilligan's Island. But the problem is Greta, despite the hair, really can't carry it forward the way Marianne did. Actually, the whole crew of the USS Minnow has now been replaced by smelly environmentalists who really, really hate Jews. And like the USS Minnow, they may be stuck wherever they land for years at a time, because none of these people is going to make a radio out of a coconut. I mean, if you think Greta ain't making no radio out of no coconut. Anyway, the real question here is the same as always. It really is a serious question. Why is it we can almost always identify, actually not almost, just literally always, climate change activists as fans of Hamas, one of the least environmentally friendly groups on the planet? And the answer is simple. It's something called the omni cause. Okay, for the left, there is one giant mush of cause. Okay, it doesn't matter if you're talking about trans rights or the environment or Hamas. It's all part of the omni cause. What unites the omni cause? Well, it's that people hate the system. And by this, they just mean capitalism in the West. That's all. Greta hates capitalism. She hates the West. That's the end of it. And whether she is attacking the West by siding with Hamas, or whether she's attacking the West by parroting a bunch of random green environmental nonsense, she's been doing this crap since 2019. She released a book in 2019 and somehow incredibly became even more obnoxious. At some point, we're going to reach the obnoxiousness singularity with Greta Thunberg and the world will end. She said in 2019, quote, "What we refer to as normal is an extreme system built on the exploitation of people and the planet. It's a system defined by colonialism, imperialism, oppression, genocide by the so-called global north to accumulate wealth that still shapes our current world order." I mean, notice the language there. She's talking about genocide in 2019. In 2019, by like the West generally. So yes, that's what's happening here. This is a boat full of just complete clods who hate the West. And that is why they all talk like this at university campuses. And this is why the media support them, because this is all part of a broader left-wing rubric that says that capitalism is bad and successful people are exploiters. And everybody who is poor and makes bad decisions in life, all those people, all of them, are all exploited by all of those terrible capitalistic Western pigs. Meanwhile, she's Swedish. So listen, I wish all of these people a pleasant 3-hour tour. And if they land on the shores of some uncharted desert isle, I hope that they land without the keffiyehs so they can see how the Hamas locals treat them without their terror, solidarity, insignias. How Westerners are actually treated when they end up among the actual barbarians that they believe they support. And meanwhile, again, as I say, this is part of a broader movement that actually is quite dangerous because when the West begins to parrot the absolute lies of terror groups, that has consequences. It does. When you continue to say the word genocide, when a genocide no longer and never has applied in this area, then you are fomenting the same language that leads to a raising of the temperature. And when you raise the temperature this much, people are going to get violent. And this, of course, happened over the course of the weekend in Boulder, Colorado. So in Boulder, Colorado, there's a terror suspect who, as it turns out, is a radical Islamist who was let into the country. He's a 45-year-old Egyptian national. And he was originally let into the country on some sort of asylum claim, which, again, ridiculous. Absolutely insane. So he moved to Colorado Springs 3 years ago with his wife and 5 kids. He'd spent 17 years living in Kuwait. And then he claimed asylum. He said that he was only able to live in the United States. The man entered the United States with a tourist visa in 2022. That's a 6-month visa. He then overstayed, like 500,000 immigrants do every year. And then he claimed asylum so he wouldn't be kicked out. And then he was given a work permit while he waited years for his immigration case to work through the system. And as it turns out, this is just a Jew-hating radical Islamist piece of crap. And what he ended up doing was going to a pro-hostage rally led by some presumably liberal Jews in Boulder, Colorado. Boulder, Colorado is not known as a conservative hotbed. And he proceeded to throw Molotov cocktails, injuring 12 people, one pretty seriously. Then he was arrested on scene. So here is a video of this delightful new American, the asylum refugee, a person that we definitely needed to leave in the country. He was driving to attack people with Molotov cocktails. And as he was driving, he was speaking in Arabic to a camera. And here's what he had to say. Allah is greater than anything. Allah is greater than the Zionists. Allah is greater than America and its weapons. Allah is greater than the F-35 planes. Allah is greater than everything else. So why do we fear those who are inferior to Allah rather than fear Allah himself? Do not forget, Allah Akbar. Do not forget that Allah is greater than everything. Not the Zionists, America, Britain, France, or Germany. And only Allah has the right to be feared. I say to my mother, my wife, my children, my brothers, my people, I attest before Allah and before you that Allah, his messenger, and jihad for Allah's sake are more beloved to me than you and the whole world are. I think the funniest thing about the Greta Thunbergs of the world is these people say like everything they believe right out loud. Right out loud. He doesn't just hate the Jews. It's America, Germany, France. Jihad and murder are more beloved to him than his own family. Like they say it all right out in the open. Nobody ain't hiding nothing. And yet we're supposed to believe that actually this is all because of victimization and the exploitation and colonization and all this kind of trash. So we know exactly who this person is. Another failure of our immigration system. Remember, it was just last week that Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, was before the United States Senate saying we are going to revoke the visas of people who are here as guests who hate the country. And the Democrats are like, no, you can't do that. And Rubio's like, the hell I can't.
The bottom line is if you're coming here to stir up trouble on our campuses, we will deny you a visa. And if you have a
First
visa
Amendment
and we find you, we'll revoke it.
Living in the United States?
And we're going to do more. There are more coming. We're going to continue to revoke the visas of people who are here as guests and are disrupting our higher education facilities. People are paying money. These kids pay money to go to school, and they have to walk through a bunch of lunatics who are here on student visas.
Disrupting the
Simple
foreign
as
policy of the United States.
I want to do more. I hope we can
That's
find more of these people.
pathetic, Mr.
In fact, the other day, some guys led a riot. I forgot what university it was, and I asked, please, can you find the arrest records of all the people that were arrested at that riot at that campus? Because if any of them have a visa, we're going to revoke it.
Again, the Democrats were really mad about this. How could he say that there are people coming to our campuses and into our country who hate the country? They all love our country. They're all wonderful. No, they're not. No, they're not. And we should be deporting all of the people who believe like this person believed. And if you pretend that there is no evidence, that's not true. He was posting on behalf of the Muslim Brotherhood in 2012. This particular suspect. Well, now Kristi Noem, the Department of Homeland Security head, she says that the Boulder suspect's family has been detained by ICE and marked for removal, which seems like a pretty good solution.
Today, the Department of Homeland Security and ICE are taking the family of suspected Boulder, Colorado terrorist and illegal alien Mohammed Solomon into ICE custody. Now, Mohammed's despicable actions will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But we're also investigating to what extent his family knew about this horrific attack, if they had any knowledge of it, or if they provided support to it.
Okay, now again, when it comes to the immigration policy of the administration, it's totally right. But there are two factors that are now happening. One is the loose immigration policy of the Biden administration and the Obama administration and other administrations has led to a moment where America is chock filled with people who hate the country. If you want to see the full effects of that, take a look at France, where there are riots in the street constantly by radical Muslims who are just burning stuff all over the place. You know what we don't need? That in America. We don't need that. And the Trump administration is doing exactly the right thing in stopping all of that. Well, the other thing that's happening is the media's parroting of Hamas propaganda is leading to a radical uptick in left-wing anti-Semitism and left-wing terrorism. Right? It is not a coincidence that this sort of thing is happening on the heels of the murder of two people in Washington, D.C., two Jews in Washington, D.C., one of whom was an American citizen. That's because the media continue to parrot literally every piece of propaganda. Again, the thing that's happening right now in Gaza, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is the distribution of aid designed to get to the people and not to Hamas, is wildly successful. Hamas is attempting to stop it. They want a reversion to the UN handing out the aid, because if the UN hands out the aid, it keeps Hamas alive. And so the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has been doing a good job. So what did Hamas do? They just lied. They claimed that Israel had opened fire near a Gaza aid distribution center and killed dozens of people and injured hundreds of others. And it was just a lie. According to officials from the Hamas-run Gaza Ministry of Health, at least 31 people were killed and 170 wounded on Sunday when Israeli forces opened fire on civilians massing near an aid site. Now, question, why would Israel possibly do that? That'd be the stupidest possible thing they could do, is just start firing indiscriminately at crowds of people gathered to receive aid. Legitimately the dumbest thing in history for them to do if they didn't do it, it turns out. Israel denied it was behind the attack, and then they released drone footage of unidentified masked men shooting unarmed civilians near the aid center. And they released contemporaneous footage showing that they had nothing to do with any of this kind of stuff. The Hamas line was not substantiated, in other words. It didn't matter. CNN put out a headline immediately, quote, at least 31 Palestinians killed after Israeli forces opened fire near Gaza aid distribution center. The BBC went with a similar headline, quote, 31 dead after Israeli forces attack near Gaza aid center, says Hamas-run health ministry. On ABC's Good Morning America, again, they just quoted the Hamas-run health ministry uncritically. The Washington Post had to issue a botched retraction. They updated their story, changing its headline to read, "More than 30 killed by gunfire near U.S. aid site in Gaza." The paper did not add an editor's note explaining why it made wholesale editorial changes to the story. This kind of media coverage, the lie about genocide, the lie that Israel is just indiscriminately shooting people near an aid station, this kind of stuff is Hamas propaganda. It is Hamas propaganda. Clearly, implicitly, that's what it is. And it's being fomented by a media that, again, agrees with the Greta Thunbergs of the world and actually really despises the West in major ways, despises capitalism, is far left, believes that the West bears some sort of blood guilt for its success. Caroline Levitt over the White House ripped into the BBC over its reporting correctly.
The administration is aware of those reports, and we are currently looking into the veracity of them because, unfortunately, unlike some in the media, we don't take the word of Hamas with total truth. We like to look into it when they speak, unlike the BBC, who had multiple headlines. They wrote, "Israeli tank kills 26, Israeli tank kills 21, Israeli gunfire kills 31, Red Cross says 21 people were killed in an aid incident," and then, oh wait, they had to correct and take down their entire story, saying, "We reviewed the footage and couldn't find any evidence of anything." Oh. Okay, so we're going to look into reports before we confirm them from this podium or before we take action. And I suggest that journalists who actually care about truth do the same to reduce the amount of misinformation that's going around the globe on this front.
Oh, good for Caroline Levitt and company. That is exactly right. And of course, the White House knows this because nobody has been more maligned than the White House on a wide variety of issues, including on immigration. The headline of the weekend, by the way, is this Washington Post headline about immigration. It's an unbelievable headline. Quote, "The mysterious drop in fentanyl seizures on the U.S.-Mexico border. The reasons behind the decrease of fentanyl seizures in the U.S. and along the Mexico-U.S. border are complex." That was their headline. "It is not a mysterious drop. We told people not to illegally immigrate, and we said we would arrest them if they do. And then they didn't come. That's why there's a drop in the fentanyl traffic. We actually closed the border. It turns out it was not hard to do. We did an entire series last year called The Divided States of Biden, in which one of the episodes, we traveled down to the U.S.-Mexico border. It was wide open because of Joe Biden's policy. We closed it, and the Washington Post says it's mysterious. It's funny. When good things happen for the Trump administration, it's mysterious. Mysterious. We have no idea why. We have who could understand? I mean, we know why. So can the White House. The White House responded to this stupidity.
How is this mysterious? There is no mystery about why there is a decrease in fentanyl coming into the United States. This administration's strong border policies are the reason there has been a decrease in fentanyl trafficking. His strengthened relationship with Mexican President Sheinbaum and all of the measures he has been taking to deter illegal human and drug trafficking at our United States southern border is the reason for plummeting fentanyl seizures at the U.S. border. There is nothing mysterious about that, and we'd like to see the Washington Post update their headline accordingly. This is clearly trying to intentionally manipulate the minds of the Americans, and I think the American people understand why there's been a fentanyl drop. And our office responded to this inquiry. We provided a whole host of the reasons that fentanyl seizures at the southern border have dropped, and the Washington Post refused to run them, and that's despicable.
Of course, that is 100% right. And the Democrats, for some reason, keep wrong-footing themselves on these issues. There's like very obvious issues. Don't let people who hate the country into the country. Arrest people trying to get into the country illegally. Maybe keep track of the people who are in the country. New ABC News report breaking: 2 Chinese nationals have been charged with allegedly smuggling into the United States a fungus called Fusarium graminearum, which scientific literature classifies as a potential agro-terrorism weapon, according to the DOJ on Tuesday. Apparently, these 2 characters were allegedly receiving Chinese government funding for their research, some of it at the University of Michigan. So they were literally developing a bioweapon, according to the DOJ. So what are the Democrats focused laser-like on? Not threats, foreign and domestic, but on going after the people who stop the threats, foreign and domestic. Here's Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, threatening to reveal the identities of ICE agents.
Every single ICE agent who's engaged in this aggressive overreach and are trying to hide their identities from the American people will be unsuccessful in doing that. This is America. This is not the Soviet Union. We're not behind the Iron Curtain. This is not the 1930s. And every single one of them, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified. That, in fact, is the law.
Okay, unbelievable. Like that's your focus. The Democrats have a unique capacity. I will say, President Trump, it's amazing. He's like a magnet for iron filings of dumb from the Democrats. Like they just, whatever is the dumbest possible thing they can do, they just immediately rush to it. So the most popular part of President Trump's agenda by far is his immigration agenda. By far. It's not close in the polling. And Democrats are like, what if we target ICE agents? What the hell is wrong with you people? Why are you so stupid? I don't understand. Okay, meanwhile, in international news, President Trump is saying the same thing that he's been saying for 10 years, and somehow people are surprised. So President Trump has been in the midst of these negotiations with Iran via Steve Witkoff, the special envoy. Again, I'm unimpressed, shall we say, with Steve Witkoff's negotiating acumen thus far. Okay, but President Trump has now come out and he has said, we will not allow any enrichment of uranium, is what he says on Truth Social. He says, under our potential agreement, we will not allow any enrichment of uranium. Now, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, had also said that. Steve Witkoff had also said that. But that does apparently contradict a proposal that Witkoff made to Iran on Saturday, the details of which were reported by Axios on Monday. Well, if Witkoff is making proposals that are not what the president wants, then he is betraying a fundamental promise made by the president of the United States in both terms. President Trump has been very clear on this. No Iranian enrichment, because we don't trust them, nor should we. There are reports that they are rushing toward a nuclear weapon as fast as possible. The idea that Iran desperately needs nuclear energy for civilian purposes is on its face an absurdity. It is a wildly underdeveloped economy. They have some of the greatest oil resources on planet Earth. What are they worried about? Environmental consequences of drilling? Precisely. It's absolute bull, and everybody knows it's absolute bull. Iran would like an interim deal whereby they have some sanctions removed just to get beyond the period where they can rearm and close the skies. The big problem for Iran right now is there's an open window above Iran. Israel destroyed a lot of their air defense capacity in the last round of fighting between Iran and Israel. And that means that a potential strike on their nuclear facilities is quite real. So Iran has been doing a couple of things. One is they're apparently digging even deeper bunkers for their nuclear facilities, hoping that this will somehow protect them from an Israeli strike or a combined Israeli-American strike or something like that. And they have been delaying. They really want to delay. This is their big deal. Try to run out the clock. Try to simply push the negotiations and push them and push them and push them. Apparently, there was a report earlier this week that the Trump administration would propose an arrangement that would allow Iran to continue enriching uranium at low levels while the U.S. and other countries work out a more detailed plan intended to block Iran's path to a nuclear weapon, but also give it access to fuel for new nuclear power plants. That is a non-starter. It should be a non-starter for the Trump administration. Again, that was exactly the thing that President Trump was rejecting in that Truth Social post. No enrichment. Why? Because anything less is the JCPOA, what President Trump labeled the worst deal in American history. Anything less is the Barack Obama deal. The JCPOA, the Obama deal, allowed Iran to retain all of its centrifuges and enrich uranium to 3.67%. Any proposal that mirrors anything remotely like that is the Obama-Iran deal. It also sunsetted provisions on bomb-making technology, so they would have a full-scale nuclear program by 2030. It also ignored Iran's missile program, which they have been steadily developing. It also allowed them to spend all of the sanction-relieved money on as many terror groups as they could, which is how they rebuilt their entire terror network from Hezbollah down to the Houthis in Yemen. All the monitoring was being done by inspectors basically selected by the Iranian regime. Inspectors from the IAEA were forced to petition Iran's mullahs to visit sensitive sites and then wait over 2 weeks, which obviously is a way of ensuring that Iran could move around whatever materials they were pushing. So, again, all of this cannot be imitated by the Trump administration. President Trump has said that over and over and over again. It's not me, that's President Trump. President Trump has said correctly that it would be bad for the world for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. That is the purpose of these negotiations. If Iran refuses to negotiate along the lines the United States wants, the United States should simply stand back and say, okay, well, we did what we could. And then the Israelis will do what they have to do. Okay, that is the proper solution if these talks go sideways. Now, again, the easiest solution and the probably least risky solution, if the Iranian talks go sideways, which I assume they will, because the Iranian foreign minister keeps tweeting over and over again this morning, about how they need their nuclear program. If that continues, the easiest solution would just be to fly one sortie over Iran that takes out their nuclear facilities with B-2s. That would end it. Done. Okay, that would not lead to worldwide conflagration. It would not lead to a giant regional war because Iran does not have the resources for that. Who exactly would ally with Iran in such a war? Russia is a little busy, you may have noticed. Russia's had very little interest in defending Iran along any serious lines for the last couple of years, not just because of Ukraine, but because Iran's military is in fact inferior in the region, which is why they've had to use terror proxies. But if the United States does not wish to participate in such a strike for whatever reason that I think is baseless, then let the Israelis do it. Okay, but don't sign a deal just to sign a deal, because that would, in fact, violate the stuff that President Trump has been talking about for years and years and years. Speaking of which, the Ukrainians unleashed one of the great military attacks in modern history over the course of the last few days. They unleashed them in a surprise attack on Sunday. They hit airfields from eastern Siberia all the way to Russia's western border. According to the New York Times, they secretly planted a swarm of drones in Russia. The assault set several Russian aircraft on fire, stunned the Kremlin, and dealt a strategic and symbolic blow to Moscow's relentless bombing campaign in Ukraine. So apparently, Russia's defense ministry said on Sunday that Ukrainian drones had attacked airfields in 5 regions stretching across 5 time zones: Murmansk, Irkutsk, Ivanovo, Ryazan, and Amur. Several aircraft caught fire in Murmansk near the border with Norway and also in Irkutsk in eastern Siberia. Ukraine said 117 drones were used in the attacks, causing $7 billion in damage. The SBU said dozens of aircraft were damaged in the strikes. The New York Times verified videos that showed successful strikes at Olenya Air Base in Murmansk and Belaya Air Base in Irkutsk. The plan was called Operation Spider's Web. Drones were planted across Russia near military bases, according to the Ukrainians, and then they were all activated simultaneously. The plan began a year and a half ago. And apparently, people who were involved in the attack were withdrawn from Russia before it took place, according to the Ukrainians, and taken to a safer place. And this was all done remotely. Over many months, according to the Ukrainians, dozens of drones were secretly transported into Russia. The drones were packed onto pallets inside wooden containers with remote-controlled lids, and then they were loaded onto trucks. Ukrainian officials said the crates were rigged to self-destruct after the drones were released. There was no indication the truck drivers knew what they were hauling, according to Ukrainian officials. I mean, it really is an unbelievable operation, very much akin to the Israeli beeper operation, like operations that have a long tail planned far in advance and show the vulnerability of Russia to this sort of attack. By the way, not just Russia. It means the United States really needs to up our own security because this sort of attack could be carried out by, say, Chinese forces. I mean, they're shipping tons of stuff over here all the time. And let's just say that our ports are not particularly secure. Apparently, there are videos showing drones flying less than 4 miles from the Olenya Air Base. The person recording can be heard suggesting the drones had been launched from a truck parked down the road. Ukraine said 41 planes had been hit, about 1/3 of the strategic cruise missile carriers at Russian air bases across 3 time zones. The Times obtained radar imagery from a space imaging company. 7 strategic bombers appear to be destroyed, likely 4 Tupolev Tu-22M and 3 Tupolev Tu-95 bombers. American and European security officials said they estimated as many as 20 Russian strategic aircraft may have been destroyed or severely damaged. I mean, points for creativity for the Ukrainians. And one of the goals is demonstrating for the Ukrainians that they are not going to surrender, that they are going to continue to push, and that the best thing that the Russians can do is come to the table, which is, in fact, the proper approach here. Vladimir Putin has shown zero compunction about continuing the war so far. The Ukrainians are going to have to push him to the table. That's how it works in a war. You don't get to an armistice unless both sides feel that they've gone about as far as they can go. Right now, Russia does not feel that. But if Ukraine continues to push, maybe they will. Alrighty, folks, the show's continuing for our members right now. We'll get into the fraught New York mayoralty race. Apparently, a socialist might win again. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.